All right, we are in the final week of the Tales collab. So this is where I basically put all my thoughts together on the collab, give it a rating, and explain, why I feel the way that I feel. If you watch my channel long enough, you know how it is. First thing I'm going to talk about is just the gacha in general. I will say that Last Claudia did a very good job with both of these banners. So, part two was Alphen and the Crown Contest arc. I think Alphen's a pretty solid unit overall, and Crown Contest was a decent arc. And the same with, excuse me, Velvet with her arc. I think it's called Compass. Uh, Great character, pretty good arc. Basically, with the characters specifically, first off, you have a character that's coming from the new Tales game. So if you're a fan of the new game and you like this character, definitely good choice for them to use this unit. As far as Velvet, she's from an older Tales game, but one of the most popular characters in the series. So the fact that they brought her on this time, I think was a very smart choice. And Adis did a good job of developing their unit kits. Basically, Velvet, I would argue, is the best character in the game in terms of easy use. Her kit basically has everything she could possibly need. So anything that you would give her would be an added bonus. So she's a very easy unit to build. So she's number one best, like, user friendly character in the game, 100%. And then as far as Alpha, he's just a decent character in general. He can do a decent job in any kind of event scenario. I still think that he's more of a PvP unit, but I don't have him strong enough in terms of like testing it. However, what I will say about Velvet in terms of PvP, she's a lot better than I thought. I'll say that much. There is one glaring weakness that she has that I'm not going to talk about here because that's more for the PvP meta slaves to figure out. But outside of her one weakness, she's actually pretty strong in arena specifically. And I've actually tested her in guild battle and she did pretty good there too. But I do still think that she's more of a PvE unit, but definitely good all around her on both of these characters. So Last Cloud Aegis, y'all did a really good job with this collab in terms of the characters. In terms of the arcs themselves, I think they're both decent. Both of the arcs match the character that's on each banner, so I'm very happy to see that. And there are some useful abilities that you can learn. And on top of that, the Ether Award on both arcs are actually decent. I often complain that a lot of the Aether rewards that you can get in this game are not as good as they used to be in the past, but they did a really solid job with these arcs as well. So, definitely a step in the right direction. So this is a very, very positive start in my critiquing of this, particular collab. Now, let's talk about the other stuff. Oh yeah, and I guess before I continue with that, let me just briefly mention one thing. In my video regarding the newest character, I didn't talk about his credential gear. I wasn't planning on buying it to begin with, so I just didn't care to talk about it. But the clear winner is the sword. Just getting him some more damage and damage cap. It's just really good with decent strength stats with the element that he uses. His accessory is really nothing special, to be perfectly honest. I think it's fine, but I don't think it's worth it if you're trying to spend money. So if you're picking one or the other, the obvious winner is a sword. I didn't bring it up in the other video, but I'll just bring it up now just in case y'all are wondering where your money is well spent if you like the character and you're on a budget. Okay, so let's talk about the event itself. And there's one very obvious thing that has to be discussed when it comes to the collab that's missing specifically. Now, anybody that's played Last Claudia for long enough knows exactly what I'm about to say. This is a video game collab, and there is a pretty known set standard. In a video game collab, we typically have music from the game itself, or at least one of the games if or they're featuring multiples. And unfortunately, we did not get that. We just have the basic Last Claudia music. Now, that's not to say anything bad about Last Claudia's music. I do think that Last Claudia overall has an amazing soundtrack. I don't really talk about it a lot, but this game does have a very strong soundtrack overall. So I'm not against the music of the game itself. However, there is an expectation for video game collabs to have the music from the video games. Now, for anime, we don't get that, so if we don't have it, it's not a big deal. But for a video game, it is a big deal. And because that's not here, that will deduct points 100%. It is very necessary. Now, I will say that this excavation music I actually do like. It is one of their newer tracks, and I do think it's pretty cool. But again, we're still missing the key thing in a video game collab, which is the music. Now that I'm in this particular thing here, I when I first saw that they added this to this event, I kind of laughed. I was a little bit tickled inside, especially when I complained about the Overlord collab, saying that this should have been something that was added, for the whole Tomb of Nazarick thing and digging for treasures from their tomb and all that stuff. They basically put it here. It's as if they were listening to me. I don't know. But anyway, at least it gave us something. So, it's not just the same old repeating stages. We got a little bit of something extra here where you can get some decent rewards for continuing to dig and, find treasure and whatnot. So I'll give them credit for that. Also, this is kind of a typical, repeat certain stages over and over, just like they all are. The only thing that some people won't like is the fact that there's no map for this particular collab. I prefer a map, but I'm not going to really hold it against them. Especially since they did give us excavation. They did give us something. So I'm not going to complain too much about that. We also do have a time trial. So if you're interested in doing that, as you would expect, it's there. It gives you something to do. Also, they have the unit damage ranking. This is the second one that we've had now. So basically, now this is something that I didn't know when I made my video regarding this. I was under the impression that it was just going to be one damage ranking thing that you can use for all the characters. I didn't know that they were separating it for multiple characters all at the same time. So when I was complaining about the, rewards not being good enough, I still agree that the first player reward is still too low. And I do think there should be a minimum of maybe 3,000, maybe 6,000 for first place. I do think that I still stand by that, but I almost see what they were going for. They were like, well, you have 3 different ways to potentially get crystals. But again, first place prize should at the very least get a 10 pull. And it's still a bit of an insult. However, I will say that the event overall is still pretty cool. Being able to, do the most damage you can with the character. I'm happy with the results. Again, I'm not going to push any further because there's really no point. But, and I'm not using Kyle. I don't care. So, anybody else who uses Kyle that wants to just, show off their abilities, feel free to have fun, but I could care less. But either way, the event itself, which is the whole point of this, is still a cool idea, and I'm glad they added it. So it does give you something to do. I'll say that much. And we've had 2 of these unit damage rankings. This is the second one that we had during this collab. So thankfully, we have had a lot to do, which is a very good thing. Which is also why I'm not upset about us not having a map, because we've had several things to do, so I'm really not upset. We also had insights on the older characters from the first time we had this collab. So if you have Stan, Luke, or Yuri, and you actually are fans of these characters, you can actually build them up to make them stronger. I'm glad that they did this, because this sets up kind of a future for potential and other collab characters. Because this is something that I brought up when I talked about Insight for Melza, I believe. Is I was hoping that they were going to do collab characters too, because there are definitely certain collab characters that I would love to see become a lot better that just weren't built as good as they should have been. So I want to say that this makes me very happy, not specifically for these characters, but for other collab characters in the future. Now, I have heard people say that both Stan and Luke have really good insight abilities. So if you're fans of these characters, from what I've heard, they have a lot of good boosts. I'm not going to invest in any of them just because they're not personally my favorites. But I'm not going to discourage anyone from building them. They are pretty solid from what I've heard, and I think it's worth it if you're into it. The only reason that I'm not building them myself is because Insight Materials, especially if you're doing this as a free to play, it takes a long time to get the materials. So if I'm going to be like putting all my effort into, building up Insight, it's going to be for a very specific character that I really like. I can't afford to just willy-nilly give it to random people because I won't even be able to build them all. So I'm the kind of person, if I'm going to build someone, I'm going all the way. I'm not going to half-ass it. So that's how I'm going to save my materials. But if you're fans of these characters, I'm sure it's worth it. As far as Yuri, I haven't heard much about him. I know some people are fans of him, but I've also heard others say that he's probably the least favorite among the three. So, take that as you will. Again, I'm not going to discourage you if you're a fan of Yuri, go ahead and build him. But if you're a meta slave, you're probably going to want to build Stunner Luke for whatever purposes you want to do it for. I don't know if it's really worth it, but if they're your favorites, go ahead. But the point that I'm making here is that we've had a lot to do, a lot of characters to build, just a whole lot of fun in this collab overall. Like, I am actually impressed. I wouldn't say this is one of the best collabs we've ever had. I wouldn't go that far. But I do think for the most part, this has been a good collab because of all of the several activities that we've had. Now, with all that said, so obviously for the most part, I am praising the collab with the one big error, big issue is the lack of the music. Now, my assumption here is that when they were negotiating with the company they were collabing with, and the topic of music came up, I'm assuming that the devs of the other game was like, nah, you're gonna have to pay up a little bit to have our music, and Adas probably said, no, we're not gonna pay that much, and that could be where communications broke down. I don't know how the process is. So that's why I'm just trying to mentally think, why would they not do that? And I'm guessing they just couldn't come to an agreement. So they just said, no, we're good. Personally, the way I would have negotiated it is if the price was going to be too high for the newest Tales game, just say, okay, well, what if we just use the Tales game that Velvet was in? Since it's an older game, maybe you won't charge as much. That's the way I would have negotiated it, because then at least for your players, they would have gotten some kind of music, even if it wasn't the newest one. It would have been something different still that we could have appreciated. But again, I don't know how the conversations went. Either way, I do still take off for it because it is an expectation that we've had. Now, I do know that we've had this collab before, and I don't remember if we had music for that or not. It was about 2 years ago, so it's hard to remember. But I do believe that this is the only video game collab that we've ever not had the music in, which is why it's fairly obvious to us older players that this is kind of a huge miss, which is why I'm deducting points. Other than that, everything else has been pretty good. And the only other complaint that I had, which I made a whole video on, are the prizes for the damage rankings. But I'm not going to hold that specifically against the collab because I think this is just how the prizes are going to be in general. But I do think it takes away from people being motivated to want to push, to put a lot of effort in for people that are actually competitive. So that's the thing. But overall, I'm going to give this collab an 8 out of 10. And 8 is still a pretty good score because, again, they had a lot of cool things that we could do. So this is overall a decent collab. What hurt it the most was the lack of music. And that has to be a big deduction. That's a huge miss. But other than that, they did an excellent job. The banners are great. We had a variety of things to do in the game, so it wasn't really that boring or anything. Like, overall, I'm actually pretty happy with this collab. Definitely. All right, that's going to be it for today. See you on the next collab.